Hi guys, and welcome to my well overdue review for Capcom's latest Resident Evil 4 remake. As many of you know, I've spoken extensively on this channel not only regarding Resident Evil in general, but how the original Resident Evil 4 is my favourite video game of all time. If you'd like to hear more of my review of the OG Resident Evil 4, click here to find out more. But today, we're here to don our aviator jackets, bring out the one-liners, and face down hordes of infected mind control villagers and cultists in
Resident Evil 4.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Being one of Resident Evil's most divisive but popular entries in the long-running Japanese survival horror franchise, I'm sure nearly every horror game fan is aware of the impact and popularity that spawned from this 2005 release exclusively for the Nintendo Gamecube at the time. I'm lucky enough to still own my own copy, and it's still my most preferred way of playing as the controller is so well laid out for the control scheme. It has since been ported to nearly every gaming device imaginable, with multiple remasters and HD versions. As a side note, the Wii version aiming is actually super fun, and I've never had such a high accuracy score. With Capcom's successful run of Resident Evil remakes spanning from the groundbreaking Remake on the Gamecube, I still remember how much the graphics blew my mind at the time, and I think it's still probably the scariest Resident Evil to date. The atmosphere in this game is unparalleled, and with the multiple remasters of this, you can still play it on nearly any modern console or PC. But there was so much build up and hype for a Resident Evil 2 remake following this, for so many people, myself included. As the original Resident Evil 2 is my next favourite Resident Evil, next to 4. There's something very familiar and comforting about this game. As strange as that might sound, I'm never against the idea of just plugging in my PS1 and doing a run through of this game any old time. It finally got announced, but I was a little bit sceptical after Capcom's direction with Resident Evil 5 and 6. However, Resident Evil 7 really impressed me to a point I thought, right, now we're back on track. This feels so much more in line with what fans want from that original tension, theme and feel of those original games, even if it isn't a new perspective. Again, for my thoughts on Resident Evil 7, I do have an in-depth review here. Finally, Resident Evil 2 Remake was announced, and when it came out, I loved it to death. It really exceeded my expectations in so many ways. It was so much more intense with the ferocity of the enemies. Lickers, dogs, the addition of Mr. X stalking you wherever you go really ramped up the tension, as he was only in the B scenarios of the original, so there were some welcome tense changes and challenges thrown in there, such as the original Gamecube one did. The lighting, animations, voice acting and drama were all handled super well. It was great to see classic Resident Evil puzzles and inventory management back in Resident Evil again, and I highly recommend it whenever I can. After this, I was really hyped for Resident Evil 3, as that was my least played of the original trilogy. However, I've since grown to love the original. The remake, however, I remember feeling a little underwhelmed by it. It seemed to be all flash and no substance. It was a very short campaign with tons of really over-the-top action scenes, like all of a sudden Michael Bay had taken over direction of this game. And it was also full price for like half the content and playtime you got in Resident Evil 2 Remake. That had 4 campaigns. This rush game that seemed extremely short with cut content, I remember there being a bit of an uproar about it when it came out. However, I still enjoyed it for what it was. I was definitely assuming that Resident Evil Code Veronica would be next, as Resident Evil 4 still plays and looks great on modern consoles, so a remake to me is irrelevant really. If any game needs the remake treatment, it's Code Veronica. I saw the trailer announcement, and with how similar Resident Evil Village captured that same feel, I already had suspicion they'd managed to pull this off. And God was I right. Resident Evil 4 delivers on so many levels, it turned out more amazing than I could have ever imagined. And I know the original like the back of my hand, so although I am biased, with that said, this remake may not only be my new favourite remake of the Resident Evil series, but I might even enjoy it more than the original Resident Evil 4.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Such a pleasure to finally make your acquaintance, Mr. Kennedy.
So how does the story differ in this remake? Are there missing areas, change of characters or plot twists, all that would annoy or confuse the hardcore fanbase or newcomers? Well, the original story centres around Leon S. Kennedy. 6 years have passed since the events of Resident Evil 2. He is now working under protection of the President's family via a secret organisation. The President's daughter has been kidnapped by Krauser, a former mentor of Leon, and is being held by a bunch of villagers and cultists in an unnamed Spanish village. The cult, the Los Illuminados, is run by Osmond Sadler. He has unearthed a parasite which can control the mind of its host, called the Las Plagas. This is what is infecting the villagers and cultists, and under rule by both Osmond Sadler and also partly Ramon Salazar. Leon is sent to rescue and return the President's missing daughter. However, she and then later Leon are both infected themselves with the parasite. It is a race against time to stop Sadler and the cult and save yourself and Ashley from falling prey to the Las Plagas before it's too late. You massacre hordes of pitchfork and flaming torch wielding villagers, slay the hooded cultists of Salazar's castle, fight giant lake monsters, the village chief, a mutated Salazar, giant ogres. You finally rid yourselves of the parasite on a prison island where you face off against your former mentor. And then with a little help from Ada Wong, you defeat Sadler with a rocket launcher and escape an exploding island on a jet ski, where you ride off into the sunset together. The end. In Resident Evil 4 Remake, there luckily isn't much deducted from the story at all, apart from the odd boss or enemy encounter. However, there is plenty additional new content, enemies, longer encounters, and whole new areas that take those few minor things place. Probably listening to the critics of Resident Evil 3 Remake, they have really fleshed out all characters, their backstories, motivations. Everyone has more screen time, with more character development and dynamics between the characters. There's plenty of memos explaining the history of the village and its downfall and so on. This is amazing to see, as I do remember the first time playing this being blown away by how long the game was and how many different chapters there were. I think the first time playing it through on normal, I'd done it in around 16 hours. On the original, I'm so used to getting through it in between like 4 to 6 hours that this was a welcome bonus. It's almost like having a favourite old horror movie taken, and it's been adapted into an even more fleshed out long running series. We see a ton more of Luis Serra in this remake, and his death here feels much more earned in this game, as you spend much more time with him. He and Leon actually have a great comedic dynamic between them. He accompanies you on some missions and helps you out here and there, but in the original the only time you fight with Luis is in the boarded up cabin. Then he just keeps appearing here and there with no real weight to anything. This is a much better version of Luis, and I believe most would agree. We see a lot more of the ability of Sadler's control over the Las Plagas within the game as well, controlling both Leon and Ashley in dangerous ways, really showing the power of this parasite and showing you how much jeopardy Ashley's life is really in. We see Ada's involvement with Wesker change towards the end of the game. In the original, we see Wesker and Ada's communication through things like bonus games like Separate Ways and Assignment Ada. But in the main game of the remake, we hear Wesker's plans for world domination once Ada returns him the sample. Not wanting that on her conscience, she actually takes control over the helicopter and flies off in another direction to not fulfill Wesker's plans. One boss fight missing is the U3 you have in the suspended cages that you have to escape. Also, if you can call it cut content, there's no sexual jokes or references made this time round. I've seen some people complain about the censorship, however I don't think it deducts anything from the game. We see Leon and Ashley really develop here over time spent with each other, with real believable voice acting and facial animations. They have their jokes and a bit of flirting from Ashley's side, and you see how protective Leon is of her. I think it's a much more warranted development rather than her just asking you at the end to do some overtime. All in all, Resident Evil 4 stays true to the original story of the game whilst being able to expand upon it by making the game much larger and drawn out. There's plenty to see, do and explore in this remake, and I'm all for it.
Stranger, stranger. Now that's a weapon.
Now, onto one of this remake's biggest strengths, the gameplay. Boy oh boy, I have championed Resident Evil 4's combat and controls for many years, but this just blows that way out of the water. The combat is so satisfying in this game, it is unreal. There is an array of combat options and improvements I'll try to sum up here. Just the fluidity and realness of it all. The movements, the recoil, the way specific shots affect enemies in different ways, and having to be tactful to conserve ammo by relying on melee attacks and takedowns with your knife. After you've gotten the hang of the controls, and you've got some impressive kill streaks going, it's really empowering. It still has the classic stun and melee combo, and the ability to shoot enemy weapons and dynamite out of the air, which is so awesome. But in terms of new abilities, there's a new parry option which fine-tunes the combat to an even finer point. Having to hit a button just at the precise moment enemies attack will parry their incoming attack with a knife, stunning them for Leon to pull off a range of melee takedowns, such as a suplex or a roundhouse kick. You can even parry Dr. Salvador now. Combat has been smoothed out during fights by having the option of quick changing weapons without having to go to the attaché case each time, which keeps things very tense and in the moment. You also have the option, rather than swiping enemies on the ground, to actually take them out with a QTE stabbed through the brain. Although this is a sweet takedown, those knife actions all have their consequences. Like the other RE remakes, the knives do have durability levels, that this time can be upgraded and enhanced. Stabs or slashes won't damage the knife as much as using it to get out of a villager grabbing you, so you still have to play it smart. Alongside, there's now a sneak attack takedown, where Leon grabs an enemy from behind and quietly takes them out. However, not to make the game too easy, they have this damage the knife quite a bit, so you're not too overly reliant on it. The knife plays a key role in this game, not only for getting out of jams, but also defensive strategies and ammo conservation. Now, one issue people have with the original is it was way too generous with ammo and weapons for it still to be classed as survival horror. Contrary to that opinion, I believe 4 balances it really well. You get just enough to see you through with room for error without making the game too easy either. Resident Evil 4 Remake really amps up the horror this time round and makes it even more of a balance. Although you may be a cool guy pulling off all these fancy combat moves, you still get scared at each new exploration of an area, jumping at shadows and never knowing what gruesome discoveries are lurking around the next corner. Resident Evil 4 features all your favourite weapons from the Red 9 to the Chicago typewriter. The guns all feel super varied, and with the help of the PS5 haptic feedback and pressure sensitive controls, you really start to master each weapon as the game goes on, finding out which weapons are more effective against which enemies, and so on.
Over here, stranger.
And of course, the merchant is back. He makes a welcome return to this remake, with a new list of quips as well as some returning favourites. You can now do additional tasks for him that earn you rewards in the form of currency that you can use on special items which you can't purchase with money. This could be a full out weapon upgrade in one go, to laser sights and so on. Now, for all my praise of the new gameplay, gunplay, melee attacks and general controls, I have to admit it took me a while to get used to this. I am so used to just blasting on through the OG Resident Evil 4 with no surprises, that now we have better AI enemies that are faster, more aggressive and scarier. That first village area did kick my ass a good couple of times. I'm so used to knowing the movements and patterns of the original enemies, that this new spin really reinstalled that fear of this game in me. And I think that's what I'd been missing. Although it's fun to get through games we know well, it's still beneficial to challenge yourselves in different ways. And honestly, I was really getting panicked and put into fight or flight mode, no matter how well equipped I know Leon is to take this village on. But after like 15-20 minutes of facing enemies and learning their behaviours and how to parry and use your melee attacks for crowd control, you start strutting around that village actually looking for a fight, rather than trying to run from one. The gameplay is phenomenal, and pulling off parries and headshots, roundhouses to suplexes, starts to feel so amazing. The game becomes addictive. I couldn't put this game down for around the first week I had it. I completed it twice, once on normal, then just a new game plus on normal with all my upgraded armour, knife, choice of firearms, and it was even more rewarding. just blasting on through these sections, including the hordes of cultists and villagers, to a bloody pulp. Leon has come far in 6 years, let me tell you. He's a regular John Wick in this game. The boss fights are even more grand and epic in this as well. The game really allows you to get creative and try different methods of taking these enemies down till you find the right combination. The sneaking also feels very effective in this game. One thing I did in my first playthrough was only sneak and backstab the Garradors. I never shot a single shot at them. It feels so much more rewarding to pull it off, having that level of variety in situations, really giving the player a lot of choice. And speaking of choice, the areas are extremely vast and open now, giving you lots of options to do side objective, explore the village or castle, as well as take in these breathtaking graphics.
Well, I wanted to go home, but Ashley just had to see this castle first.
This game looks phenomenal. Now, I tend to play a lot of older content on this channel, so I know I'm probably not as up to scratch on what some of the best looking games are, but I do have a PS5 and have played Death Stranding enough to know good graphics when I see them. And honestly, this game looks magnificent. Everything from the art style to the lighting, to the varied array of environments, the character models and so on. This game to me looks perfect. Now, I thought Leon looked good back in 2005 on the Gamecube, but he's just an absolute boss in this game. He's got it all. The looks, the hair, the cool clothing, the moves, the one-liners. He is the GOAT of Resident Evil protagonist, and he knows it.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Such a fool, Mr. Kennedy. To have been bestowed with Lord Sadler's.
You talk too much.
It failed.
You vulgar, utterly uncivilized mongrel! That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Also, instilling the fear within me even further, this game looks scary as shit. Just the lighting, harsh areas, opposing enemy designs, and more make this game feel you're really in over your head. But maybe, just maybe, you have what it takes to pull it off. I always thought the enemy design in Resident Evil 4, apart from some instances, was quite lazy, as it was just repeating villagers over and over again. However, their glowing red eyes, Sadler's Lovecraftian staff and tentacled head, and the Las Plagas headbursters really freaked me out. Dr. Salvador's mutated head and the spacing of his eyes and just general bloodiness scared me to see him pop up multiple times without warning. Not only this, but we have those spider-type infected ones that latch onto the cultist's back and make them run super quick. Also similar to the Crimson Heads in the original Resident Evil remake, if you don't finish an enemy off once you've downed them, they do get back up as like a broken neck version of themselves and are super quick and aggressive, like we see in the first house of the village. We have the goat-headed cultists also able to chant and bring out the Las Plagas in the enemies even before you've touched them. Salazar's boss design as well as Sadler's final form all felt super intimidating and an upgrade from the original designs without being too different.
I am Osman Sadler, the speaker for our Lord.
Tell someone who gives a shit.
Here I will list a few short examples of changes made both good and bad. Good. Gameplay and fighting systems. Shooting range is much more varied and fun. Voice acting is all pitch perfect.
Kennedy.
Who the hell are you?
Me? Oh, please, call me Ramon. And allow me to get straight to the point. I would like you to hand the girl there over to me. Now.
Yeah, fat chance, Ramon. The girl's just fine. With me.
Character designs and art direction is great. Level design is more varied and spacious. Ashley's general AI and ability not to be killed now is a vast improvement. She's no longer just an annoyance. The soundtrack of this remake is fantastic. Luis's screen time and death feel much more earned.
I told you. It makes me feel better.
Also Mike's.
Sorry, bad traffic. One combat chopper compliments the Hunnigan. Call me back. And I'd show these assholes what we got.
Hunnigan, I owe you one.
The ability to keep the famous jacket throughout the playthrough. Mercenary seems a lot easier in this.
Time to cause some mayhem.
Puzzles have been vastly improved. They're not to the level of Silent Hill style puzzles, but still they're better than the infantile ones on the original Resident Evil 4. Bad. Ashley's library with the suits of armour section feels way too long. The pricing of the stock of the merchant seems very high.
That there's a real boomstick, mate. It will reduce your target to a bloody pulp.
The bonus costumes all seem baffling to me. I can't look at any of them and think that looks cool or I choose to wear that in this playthrough. Apart from Leon's gangster Chicago typewriter one. The level of knife deterioration at the start. The Prison Island section is my least favourite in the original. In this, it feels more bearable, but it still feels quite long.
The fuck are you?
The underground caves area, once you first get the boat, seems a bit too long-winded. The new additional ballhead characters, the first time this approached me in the village, it really caught me by surprise and I thought it was quite a scary addition, but then after that they just started getting tiresome. Dr. Salvador is enough.
Time for the teacher to be taught.
Resident Evil 4 Remake had some big shoes to fill, and by God did it not only hit the mark, it surpassed it on multiple levels. This is a standout title and Capcom should be proud of it. It's a nice entry point for anyone that may not have played the originals without it being too drastically different from the source material. It offers player variety and expansive world to explore, a variety of different enemies to conquer, satisfying boss fights with amazing backdrops, all scored incredibly to get that adrenaline pumping. It has a ton of bonus content as well as a recently released Separate Ways DLC for Ada, which I've also heard amazing things about. If any game could take the mantle of my love for the OG Resident Evil 4, this is it. I advise anyone who hasn't tried this title yet to stop what you're doing right now and go out and get this game. You won't regret it. It feels amazing to be in 2023 and still be able to share and create content regarding Resident Evil 4 for you guys, as that's what I started doing on this very channel back in 2015.
Hello guys and welcome to my channel, it's JB2Ironzigger here, bringing you my first video of my Resident Evil 4 HD Let's Play.
It was my first ever Let's Play, and I'm grateful for everything it's brought me to this day. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to watch this video. Why not like and comment with your favourite Resident Evil 4 comments, and consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you next time.
Hasta luego.